Welcome to the Empowered Spirit Show. This is your host, Terri Ann Heiman. I'll explore the connection to the human spirit in a way that helps to navigate your life, including crisis. I am passionate about helping you to open up to your intuition and the metaphysical world of spirit to find your confidence in your own inner guidance. Take a pause, be inspired, learn ways to show up focused, centered, and more dynamic in your everyday life.
Welcome back to the Empowered Spirit Show. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining me today. This episode is being sponsored by Ritual and Shelter. Are you looking for a magical place to shop and hold space? Check out Ritual and Shelter online or in Homewood, Alabama. Browse through their bookshelves covering topics such as energy healing, crystal healing, Reiki, chakras, auras, the Akashic Records, shadow work, astrology, and earth-based healing. You can also find herbal teas and tinctures alongside their crystals and oils to help establish a mindful mindset and fluid ambience before meditation, ritual work, and reflection. Ritual and Shelter is dedicated to providing one-on-one, in-depth conversations with customers to help them find the most efficient healing methods and resources that match their unique interest and energy. They offer tarot sessions, Reiki, sound bowl, and crystal healing, and now they are offering witch consultations. Visit ritualshelter.com to book an appointment and bring peace back to the body, mind, and spirit. You can also find them on Instagram at Ritual Shelter Shop, as well as Pinterest at Ritual Plus Shelter. As this podcast goes to air, we've had an incredibly powerful cosmic week, opening us up to an expansion of consciousness. We had the powerful 8/8 Lionsgate, followed by a full moon in Aquarius, adding to an awakening in the collective consciousness. We still have several planets in retrograde, although Mercury will start moving direct on the 11th. All of this is helping us to reclaim our power, to find our purpose, and especially to live it. One of the things I like about this month is that we have an additional new moon. It's called a black moon, and this occurs when there are 4 new moons in an astrological season. And that third new moon is coming in designated as a black moon, which will occur on August 23rd. There is something so profoundly beautiful about honoring the cosmos and the natural rhythms of the seasons and our spiritual practice and healing work. Just as nature moves through the cycles of growth, the harvest, the release, the setting up, the renewal, our souls too benefit from these different types of healing and transformation at different times of year. Summer has been avowed a season of deep transformation and growth. And as I've been talking about the idea of shape-shifting and gap tapping, it has been a time of addressing those underlying habits which do contribute to our growth, rewiring our brain, creating new patterns in how we show up in life. This transitional period, we call it late summer energy, offers an opportunity to integrate the insights from what you've learned and gathered in the summer to what you'll be opening up to in the fall. Right now, we can feel a little worn down. Maybe you need to do a little practices that help you return to that place of who you are. I like to always come back to the energy of Reiki. My Reiki schedule is up for the fall, and I am offering an advanced Reiki skill workshop on August 16th at my home studio. This is for those already attuned that want to come together and practice and meditate and work with each other to help support your practice. And if you aren't Reiki attuned, my Reiki 1 class is coming up at the end of the month on August 24th. In this class, you'll learn the foundation, the history, how to work on yourself and others, because you will be attuned to this beautiful vibration of universal life force energy. Reiki 2 will happen on the fall equinox, September 20 to 21, and my next Reiki Master Retreat will come in the spring of 2026. Not sure what your next step is? Schedule a spiritual upgrade breakthrough call with me, and let's talk about the number one thing you can do to build a spiritual practice just for you. I do have openings in my private mentoring. I'll put all the links in the show notes so that you can schedule. So in today's episode, as I continue the series about the tarot, my guest is SaliCrow, whose latest book is Tarot as Storyteller, Psychic Development, Cartomancy, and Reading the Web of Fate. In this episode, we talk about the tarot, the spreads, storytelling, intuition, prediction, projection, and how the tarot can inspire all the gifts that you have in your spirit to open up more to who you truly are. Before we begin, let's take a moment to pause and breathe and set an intention for where we are right now. So, wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes for a moment. Take a nice deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, just call all your energy in, breathing all the way down deep into the earth. Inhale, expanding the breath up the body. And exhale, breathing all the way back down, slowing down, centering. Lighting a little sage as I call in the elements, the fire, the air, the earth, the water, helping us to open up our hearts, open up our third eye, finding that place within us to honor these cosmic forces in this late summer energy. Taking another deep inhale, breathing up the body. And as you exhale, dropping right into the heart, right into that deepest part of your heart. Feel that connection. Your spirit, the greater spirit, source, creator. Know that you are loved, guided, protected. Feeling all this energy coming in around us as we take this time to honor this great wheel of life. Where I am, we find ourselves in this late summer energy and the direction of the south, where we honor this growth that has come forward. We call in the directions to the south, the west, the north, and the east, above us, below us, right into the very center of your heart. Taking a moment as we call in our masters, our teachers. We call in the angels to open our hearts with joy and love. Calling in the crystal beings for amusement, magnification. And now calling in your higher self to receive these messages as you go to set the intentions and allow yourself to program the aura, inhaling and exhaling as you release that intention all around you. Setting that energy, taking one more deep inhale, bringing all your energy in with you, right into the heart. Opening the third eye, and as you're ready, grounding, centering, blinking the eyes back open, coming back. So my guest today, SaliCrow, is a natural psychic medium who weaves the tradition of her Irish traveler and Blackfoot heritage with modern magical techniques. For more than 30 years, she has worked as a spirit channel, seer, and intuitive healer, offering readings and teaching workshops throughout the United States and internationally. As an intuitive healer, SaliCrow is dedicated to helping the beings on our planet and the earth itself. She is a Reiki master in 6 schools of Reiki, a sound healer, druid, and a practitioner of Ruin, Vald, and Sirth. The author of Jump Girl, The Initiation and Art of a Spirit Seeker, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft and Spirit Seeker, and Tarot as Storyteller. She lives in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. SaliCrow sees clients locally and globally from her studio in St. Johnsboro, Vermont, or by Zoom or phone. So let us welcome SaliCrow to the show. Welcome, Sally.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, my favorite subject right now to talk about is the tarot. And we've been doing a wonderful series talking about how tarot can help us to open up more and more to those deeper gifts that we all have inside. And so your book is a perfect example of this and how we can use, especially tarot, to be a storyteller. So congratulations on that. Your third book, I
Thank
think?
you. It's my fourth book. My third book
Fourth
with Inner
book.
Traditions, but I have a previous book with North Atlantic Press.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank
No
you.
easy task for sure. So I'd like to begin and ask, did you find the tarot or did the tarot find you?
Well, that's kind of a two-part thing for me. So I am from a family where my great-grandmother was my first teacher, and she used playing cards. So I did not experience the tarot until I was 18 because I lived in rural Vermont, rural New Hampshire. And my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband, bought a deck of cards that he was going to analytically study. And they came home and immediately became mine. And so I would say the tarot did find me, but I did have a preconceived knowledge of divination and that as a tool using cards.
How fun to have it with your grandmother.
Yeah, yeah, she's a very special
Yeah,
person.
I bet. I can only imagine. So, do you remember what that first deck was?
Yes, my first deck was a Rider-Waite deck, and I used the same deck for probably the first 15 years. And I became a professional reader almost right off the bat. But I used my first deck of cards until they literally had no wax left on them and just stuck every time I shuffled them. And now I have like 20 different decks of tarot and oracle decks. But in the beginning, I really worked with one deck. And I do encourage people to form relationships with their decks. And that's
I
something I
agree.
can say. I still have that deck. I don't really use it because, like I said, the cards are not in great shape, but now they're kind of like a treasured tool.
Yeah, I agree. I remember one of my first classes, he had us write all over our deck, and I still have that deck. And I remember when one of my teachers like, "Okay, time to put the deck up. Let's go read." Right? It's like you can't have your
Yes.
notes on your cards, but it was
Yeah.
also the Rider Waite. Yeah, definitely. Have you ever been scared by the cards? Did you ever put them down, go away from them?
I never went away from them. I had a moment, and I talk about this in my book, The Importance of Centering Ourselves when we're doing a reading. And because the cards will tell you what you are, like if you're really emotional, you're going to influence the outcome. And years later, same person that bought the deck, my husband, he was supposed to meet me somewhere. And this was back in the early days of cell phones and bad service where we live. And he didn't show up where he was supposed to be, which was out of character for him. And then we were supposed to go from there, that we were going to go to dinner with some people. He never showed up to meet me to go to dinner. And, this is all probably a period of an hour and a half of being late. And so I'm starting to get really scared and I pick up my cards. And by the time I'm done reading my cards, I'm believing that my husband's dead or something on the side of a road, you know. And when he pulled into the driveway, he was a heating contractor at the time. I went running across the driveway, like bawling like a baby, because I was like, oh my God. And really, what had happened was his job ran late, and then he stayed and had a beer with the owners on their porch. And I was like, but my brain or my emotions influenced my cards to tell me that something terrible had happened. So that was a big lesson in really centering myself, which I thought I did a pretty good job of. But reading for somebody else and reading for yourself are two totally different things. You can be having the most emotional life and still do a good reading for somebody else. But when you're really emotional trying to do your own reading, likely it's going to be influenced by those emotions.
Such a good point. And you do in your book cover the idea of setting up your space and creating that altar and centering your energy. I knew none of that when I first started. None of that. And I was young, I was a teenager, I put them away. And it really wasn't
Yep.
until my 40s, as I've talked about, that I actually came back through the Mother Peace cards. And then I started
Oh,
taking
yeah.
classes in New York. Yeah, I lived in New York. Yeah. So it was kind of an interesting ordeal. And then the Wild Unknown cards came out, and those really started changing my readings because I really was only using the Rider Waite. And now, like
Yep.
you too, I have so many decks. It's really funny. In fact, I just ordered another one, and here I'm trying to
I
clean out my
know.
house and get rid of decks. How funny, right? And I created my own deck as well.
Oh,
I've been
nice.
using that for a long time. Yeah. And sometimes I think it's good to change a deck for sure. But I do think that that's such an important point, coming back to the point you made about reading for yourself versus someone else. I think it's easier sometimes to read for others for that very reason, right? So if we're affected, but the all again, just being really centered in your energy before you start is very huge. Yeah. So what led you to write this book?
Well, first of all, I consider being an author my secondary job. I had, um, I started writing this actually purposely through a blog. So I became really busy and I had already released 3 books, and I started working on the tarot as a blog where every week I was putting out, first I started with the major arcana, then I started. So part of the book, the back end where I give definitions of things, that was actually the skeleton was built through a blog.
Mm.
Because I did it purposely. I knew like I want to write a book about this. I don't have enough time. This will kind of like do 2 things at once. And then I got to not this winter because it takes a while once a book's in publishing, but the winter before, and I wrote to my publisher and I said, look, if you want this book, I need a deadline because I just kept pushing it off. So they gave me a 2-month deadline and I had it finished because I'm really good under pressure. But I always wanted to teach to offer this. And I had taught, this is the thing about all of my books that people should know is that every book that I've written, I have practiced the techniques on students to make sure that it wasn't just something that I could use as a tool, but that others had success for as well. And so I did the tarot as a storyteller as a workshop a couple of times, and people got really great results out of it. So that led to the book.
That's awesome. I love that. I do like to write too. And yeah, I'm a self-published, but yeah, but it does come from classes and teaching and working with it and recognizing how powerful the work is that then we do want to
Yes.
turn it into a book. So that's really awesome. Now, the title of your book, Tarot as Storyteller, has a tagline, psychic development, cartomancy, and reading the web of faith. I like that term. And before we even hit record, I started asking you about that. Speak to that a little bit about the cartomancy and what that includes and means.
So many psychic skills, when you talk about them, if you're looking them up, they will use the word mancy at the end of them. So geomancy, cartomancy, um, and cartomancy is the use of cards in divination. Okay, so it's primarily meaning that. Now, the book does include some spell working at the end of it, but that's more of an add-on that I wanted to add, not what the traditional word cartomancy means. Cartomancy means divination through cards. So playing cards, oracle cards, tarot cards. And I tell people you could even use, like, if you went to your grandma's house and she's got the big old stack of birthday and Christmas cards she's kept from every relative since 1935 or whatever, you could take those cards and use them in a pinch, or you could use Go Fish, you could use Uno, whatever you have for cards, you could technically use.
I love that. Yeah. So one of my first classes in New York City was at the Edgar Casey. We all got to bring our own decks. And there
Nice.
was somebody that showed up with a regular deck of playing cards. And at that time, like, what? Like, I'd never heard of that, but it did make sense. And since then, I've seen other readers that do that as well. Using the cards is so powerful.
The playing cards are also like one of the things that I talk about in the book is that they allow you to hide in plain sight. My grandmother, when she read cards, she looked often like she was playing solitaire, but she was using the cards to trigger her mind. And it often works off of numerology and then color, and then, of course, your own subconscious mind. But one of the reasons why a person might want to use playing cards at this point is that, first of all, they're easy access. You can get them at any drugstore or even mini mart. And second of all, that if you learn to read with playing cards, you could be doing this if you lived in an environment where maybe having them laying around your house was a little bit unsafe for you.
Yeah, I love that because they do have the suits, the 4 suits.
Yes.
They do have the numbers. They do
Yes.
have the count cards, somewhat, right?
Yes.
The king, queen, jack, right?
Yeah. Well, they do, and they have the
Uh,
page. So they have, well, they don't have the page. They don't have the page. They have the knight, but they
uh,
don't have the page.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They have the knights, yeah, but not the pages. And they have aces, of course, but they don't have the major, but you could still get an idea with the numerology and the suits. So I love that idea. Hiding in plain sight. Yeah. You can pull them out
Yes.
no matter where you are. People are like, what did you do in plain solitaire, right? Like your grandmother. I love that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things you talk about in the book, and I talk about as well, is like, is this predictive or projection? Is there a difference? How do you see that?
Well, I personally tell people one of the reasons why it says weaving or reading the web of fate is because I look at the future as a spider web which is actually something that's very common. Weaving in web design is very common if you look into historical descriptions of divination. And the reason I talk about it being a spider web is that I tell people the future isn't set in stone. This is what's going to happen as long as you stay on the path you're on. And so what somebody is doing when they're reading cards, it is predictive, but it's not an absolute because there's always the choice that you can change your path. So thinking about like the spider web, what the psychic reader is doing is they are watching the path that you're taking and they're predicting where that path is going to lead you, what other things are going to happen on that path. And if you really don't like what's coming, then you can work yourself back over, but it's going to take work. So a good reader is going to help you figure out a different path as well. So in that case, it is projective because you're teaching somebody like, look, the way you're going is going to take you over here. And if you don't want to be over here, then here's a plan on how you could get over here.
I love that. Predictive, not absolute. Yeah.
Yes.
And I do feel like that's how I read. Yeah. So I sometimes say it's not predictive, but I love that distinction because if you don't, and if you do, and if you go, right? But it still keeps the energy open. It still keeps the
It
free will
does.
there, which I think is really
Yes.
important. A lot of people get afraid. Oh, you're going to like change my future or tell me something I don't want to know. But no, that's not true at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, most people, when they have a reading done, I tell them that if you go and have a reading done and it doesn't sound like your life, that person's probably not a good reader. Okay,
I agree.
because we have
Yeah.
this belief that it's going to be absolute no matter what. And sometimes, just like there's good plumbers and there's bad plumbers, there's good readers and bad readers. And that's my key. I remember once I used to do things like I would go to like the person set up at the fair, mostly just to see like, is this person real or not? And I could always tell by just letting them do the $5 reading. And I remember doing one and I had my husband with me and he was standing outside the tent. And the woman, her first things she said to me was that you love your partner very much, but you can't trust a word he says. And I was like, oh my God, if you could have been any more fucking off. My husband could be honest to the point of maybe you shouldn't be that honest.
And I think that's a very important point. Yeah. Because if you're
Yes.
not resonating, something is off. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we have where we'll pull cards and they'll go, I don't know. And then later they'll get the message. But if it's
Yes.
totally off, I agree. Yeah.
Yes. And when we're reading for ourselves, I talk about this in the book too, that I highly recommend writing everything down one card at a time because in reading for yourself in the third person. So instead of doing a reading for myself, I'm doing a reading for Sally, because it makes me more honest if I can put myself over here, like the reader me is a separate being. And then by writing things down as that card comes up, I'm going to also be more focused, stay more honest about what I'm seeing.
I love that idea. It's almost like, yeah, like bringing up that subtle body, putting it over there. I love that. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
agree with writing it down. I do journal about it because I think it helps us to go in a little deeper, especially for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that as well. Now, your book is laid out very well. You give us so many ways to set up our reading, to come into the invocation, our sacred space, the altar, all of that, the ritual aspects of it, which I think is really important, whether you want to look at it as ritual or just set up your space. That just depends on personal choice. But I think it's all important that we come in with intention.
I am I'm a very accurate reader, not to say other people's style isn't good, but I usually answer people's questions before they've even had to ask them. So, I built my business in one of the most rural areas of the country by word of mouth, including even getting book contracts and being on television and things like that. So, for me, generally people come in and they don't ask any questions. I have a reading set up for people who do have questions, like I call it a weird consultation, if they want to direct the whole reading. But I do past life readings. I'm a wicked nerd. So like I do really detailed past life readings because I'm a history buff and I understand when I'm seeing something, I have a language for it, which is one of the things I really recommend to people is don't just study books on metaphysics. If you want to use your intuitive ability to be a better, reader for healing, then study anatomy and study medical Digest, and like I'm a super psychology nerd. I specialize more in people's emotional problems, and I watch documentaries and read books, and that's how you fill out the other part of being a good reader. But I do not ask questions. I ask them at the end, and I would say that probably 90% of the time I've already answered their questions.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. So they sit down and you tune in and you just start
I
reading.
do try to say, though, that I literally was raised from the time I was 3 years old to be working with my psychic ability. I'm 54, so that's a lot of time. And I'm obsessed with the metaphysical. And so this has been like, there was where you asked, was I ever afraid? There was no break in my life. My sister's a psychic, my grandmother was a psychic. This was very normal and is normal in our family. So even when I'm going on vacation, I'm doing weird psychic things.
Yeah, I agree with you on studying and learning and reading and the whole wide spectrum. I'm a Reiki master teacher too, and so I agree with that. Like, let's know what's on the inside of us, not just what's on the outside of us. So study the charts and
Yeah.
all. I think it's very helpful. And I think the more we go in deeper and deeper, we can grow with that intuitive ability. Now, did your card reading open you up to other modalities?
Yes. I'm a Reiki master in 6 schools of Reiki. I do sound healing, vocal sound healing for over 20 years. I do geomancy. I'm a druid. I am a spirit medium. But I would say that tarot was my first adult love. Spirit communication was happening from the time I was a child, but I didn't start working with it professionally till I was 30. But tarot, I started reading for the public when I was 18. And I picked it up, and I remember my husband gave me, as my boyfriend, I ended up with this deck. And I'd only had it for a very short amount of time. And one of my sister's friends was visiting, and she asked me to do a reading for her. And I went to get out my little booklet, and she just said, "No, just tell me what you see." And I was like, "I can do that." And that was it. It was like, boom, open door for me. And that doesn't mean I haven't studied, because I am obsessive, like I'm really am a nerd. I watch documentaries instead of, like, people are like, "Did you watch that movie?" I'm like, "I haven't seen that, but I know I've watched these 20 documentaries on, addiction, and these, history documentaries." So I think it really, um, it all plays in together, but the tarot did open me for sure. It did give me permission to study other things. I've studied witchcraft, traditional witchcraft, I've studied druidry. I mean, I really could just keep going. Um, it's a long list.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of what happens to a lot of people. We start studying, and now there's so many different
I,
technologies coming in. I'm the same way. But I would say Reiki really was what opened me up to everything. And then I brought the
yeah.
tarot cards back. And when I moved back to my hometown, I did most of my education in New York, but I came back to my parents. I didn't tell anybody I was reading the tarot at all. Reiki was already enough out there. And I had written a book about tapping. I'm also a EFT practitioner. And that was even out there for a lot of people, but I think we sometimes choose. But yeah, I had a near death experience and came back into my body. It's like, okay, enough of this playing small and not telling people what I do. And that's kind of when I wrote my tarot deck. Yeah.
That's a common thing, though, because I had a near-death experience when I was 12. So I almost drowned when I was 12. And not to say that that's a necessary component to being somebody who's going to be driven on a large scale to this kind of work, but it does seem to be a factor that a lot of people will have had some kind of experience where they realize, boom, there's a lot more going on than what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened with me too. And then the world shut down for me and it was like I couldn't do anything. So that was a whole nother story. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think that we can use it in so many ways. And I think now there's so many decks and so many aspects, and breaking open the myths of tarot is really important. So it's not scary. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to give away my rights or my will or something, but that's not it at all. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have clients all over the world, and one of the things I've really noticed, particularly in the United States and Canada and Australia, is a lot of therapists are starting to incorporate oracle cards. Not so much tarot. Tarot is a little more, but they're bringing oracle cards into their offices. They're bringing crystals into their offices. They're bringing these conversations in. But I have a lot of clients who are in the medical and psychological field. And that's one of the things that I'm really excited to see is that this is becoming more mainstream. Like they are realizing more of like what you were asking about, like, is it prediction or is it giving us the permission to create this? I think the counselors are more often using it as a talking point, something that they can discuss. But
Yeah.
also, what are you manifesting? That's a great way. I think oracle cards are fabulous for that. What are you manifesting? Who do you want to become? I have a long-term spread that I have because I have a bunch of spreads in the book Tarot
Yeah,
Storyteller,
I
and
wanted to
one's
bring that up because I do love that about your book is you bring the spreads and you talk about the moon cycle.
well, the long-term spread is something that I do use in my own life. I have my main working altar, which is in my kitchen behind my sink because I see it all the time. And I like dolls, so I have a lot of dolls on my altar. But I also will put cards, maybe 1 to 3 cards, that if it's something I'm really working through, and I might leave them there for a day, they might be there for a month, where I'm trying to figure out like, what is this telling me? What am I seeing? Because that long-term view, like what you said about going back to your reading and then going, oh, okay, maybe I can look at it from this perspective that I wasn't seeing it from. That's really a good way of getting that. And that's really good for people who are getting used to working with cards, whether they're oracle cards or tarot cards, because you're really going to build that development and that relationship with that particular card that's featured on your altar.
Yeah, I agree. Instead of just reading, give it some time to transmute energy and go deeper. And I
Right.
think that's really my ultimate goal because I do a lot of my private mentoring. I open them up. Originally, it was the oracles until I did my tarot deck, but sometimes I think we have to just jump in with the tarot because it's a long-term study, and I don't
Yes.
think we outgrow it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And sometimes people can get intimidated by that, which you touch upon in the book. But I think that that can help us go deeper and deeper and really get in there, especially with those hidden parts of us that we don't want to see. Especially when the same cards keep coming back around, right? Like, okay,
Yes.
maybe this is
Yeah.
important.
I go to a storyteller retreat in June, and I just ran into one of the women who attended it. She went to another event of mine, and she was talking about how much it has changed her, and she's still working with the card that she worked with primarily during that retreat. But that goes back to more of your like, are we creating this? Because the first thing I had them do, first of all, this was the most unusual retreat I've ever done because all but myself and one other person was an introvert. Okay. So you're talking about a whole group of introverts, and somebody has to be the talker. And they all were nervous when they showed up. And my first exercise was I told them they had to pick a card. They could either pick it from the deck or they could choose it per, like I want the star. And then they had to stand up because we rented a big camp retreat center. They had to stand up around the fire and tell a story about that card. It could be a personal story about themselves. It could be a made up story. It could be a true story. But it was really such a great icebreaker for them. And it ended up being a lot of it was predictive. You're not predictive, but like them using it as a stepping stone. Because the woman I ran into was like, I'm still working with temperance, right from that very first card. And she's like, my 1 foot in one world, my 1 foot in the other, trying to keep myself balanced. And so I just think that that's a really great way of, interacting with that.
Yeah, and I love that idea of pulling a card and telling a story about it. And it's not so much that you have to know what the card is, but what inspires you when you look at it, the images, the pictures. And also in your book, you also give great depictions of the cards and what the symbols are and the important ones on it. So I really love that too. In fact, I was like reading yesterday. Last night I was reading the tens. I don't know why. I just happened to be right there stuck on that page. Like, oh, I love this because sometimes we have to refresh some of what we think about it. And I love the idea of the way you talked about, the 10 was the first number that we reduce and all of that. So you give so many great tips and advice on reading the cards and how to read them in general. And then the comparisons of the suits, which is really powerful too. But I love the idea of taking as like a story. How does this card represent me? What can I bring forward? What are my wishes? What am I manifesting? So I think all of that's important and can be a lot of fun.
Because that's the thing I always try to point out to people is like, what did you see? Like, it might have been the Ten of Pentacles, and it's really the Ten of Pentacles is this lush garden, and you could be looking at the traditional reading, or maybe you only saw there was a little mouse in the bottom corner of your card. And that mouse is telling you more than what the definition in the card is because you're relating to feeling like that mouse. So you're the mouse in this huge garden. Maybe all of this abundance and prosperity that's come into your life has been a little overwhelming for you because you're just a little mouse going like, oh my God, this is really my life now. There's a lot of different ways of playing with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that where you're drawn to what jumps out at you. It's like reading messages and signs. Find a feather, pick it up, right? That
Yes,
kind of thing.
exactly. And most people
Yeah.
know how to do that. And it makes the tarot less intimidating because it isn't about like this scholarly memorization. It is about what were you drawn to? What did you see? What did you feel when you saw that? What were the first thoughts that came into your head?
Yeah. And I think that's really important in all life, not just tarot cards, but in all life. What
Yes.
are we aware of and what are we not? Like, why do we see the numbers? Why don't we? 333, my favorite one, right? So I think that's really important to have that mindfulness and the awareness that we can draw meaning from. And then what are you noticing, especially if you're working with the cards? And you know what? You can do readings without the cards, right? We know that. I'm an
Yeah.
Akashic reader and I'm an intuitive reader. So we don't
Yes.
necessarily have to have them, but they
Mhm.
are a good form. And I think they really can help us open up to our intuitive abilities. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're shorthand for the brain.
Shorthand for the brain. I love that idea. Yeah. So in your book, like I said, it's arranged very nicely, becoming the seer, telling a story. And I love your seasonal layouts, your spreads, and how you go into the moons. And you even get into, which is perfect for where we are right now, the whole idea of rare moon spreads, because we have a black moon this month. Yeah.
Right. Second new moon of the month. So the blue moon is the second full moon of a month. The black moon is the second new moon of the month.
Yeah, and I love that. And here we are having one of those this year. And I tend to draw more cards around these times, especially in my groups and my offerings, just to help us open up to what it is about beyond the astrological, but how do we energetically bring that energy in? So I love that you included that as well. Yeah,
I think that
definitely.
it's also gives people like, so ritual doesn't have to be religious.
Not at
People
all.
think of the word ritual and they have a tendency to think of religion, but ritual is just the pattern that you use. So if you, for example, you wake up, I do this, I make my coffee usually using one of two different cups that are my cups. I use a special spoon. I am very conscious about it. That's a ritual. Okay. I prefer to do it the same way every day unless I'm not home and I can't. And we can look at working with our cards in that way too. Ritual helps us to enter a more relaxed mind state quicker. So I use the example of a yoga mat. Like if anybody's ever been to a yoga class, if you've gone to yoga for any amount of time, you get to a point where if you roll out your yoga mat and you step on it and take your first deep breath, you are more centered than you were even 2 seconds ago. Okay. Because it's a ritual for you now that I roll out my yoga mat, I take a couple breaths, I'm moving into a more calm space. And your brain gets the shorthand and goes, oh, yeah, there's that yoga mat. She just stepped on it. Time to relax. The same thing can happen with our cards, that we can have these little procedures that we do that when we sit down for that, our brain already knows what it's doing.
Yeah, I so agree. And I'm laughing because I think about it. I take my cards wherever I go, whenever I travel, even if I never use them,
And they
I
usually
always
set off the radar at the airport, just so people know, like, because they don't know what that thick brick is. So I always tell people it's like pack them on the top, get used to your luggage being gone through.
Yeah, I don't really have that. I always have like a little bag or something, but that's a
I
good
have them in a
warning
bag
too.
too, but
But
I'm serious. I always have like crystals
really,
or something. They open up. I'm like, there's nothing bad in there. I got in the habit of saying things like strange, but safe.
you never know what's going to set it off. That's
That's
for
right.
sure. But I do agree with you on that, the whole idea of ritual and just having them and knowing them. And it's like there is, for me, there's like some comfort there, just in case. It's kind of like traveling with a medicine bag, too. Same thing. Travel with your
Yes.
medicine bag, your stones, the same idea,
Yes.
which I've been doing for a long time. But I think that when we can have these objects and these ideas, it does bring the ability for us to center, to come in, to have those rituals, to get a deeper meaning to our life, to get that deeper meaning to our life versus in just the surface level. And right now, I do think we're at a place where we can all go in a little deeper and begin to transmute more and more energy. Yeah. So
I
I love your
personally
book.
believe we're going through psychic evolution. I talk about this every chance I get. It's something I've been watching. We are becoming more psychic as a people. So this is definitely a time to pick up some tools.
I so agree. I so agree. Yes. I know even for myself, I was just taking a psychic development in the galactic realm, right? Like, okay, let's
Yes,
open up. We can work in all realms of possibilities, right? And we do have those
exactly.
parallel lives. Yeah. I remember in this class, I was thinking, like, I know I've talked about or heard about parallel lives. I can't really say I've experienced it. And of course, that night, what do? I open up that whole realm to understand it even better for myself. So it is possible, and we can do that. And I think we all can open up to knowing more and more about ourselves without having to give our power away all the time. Why not? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I do have a past life spread in the book as well. So for people, because I've worked with past life parallel lives, I've remembered them since I was a young child, or not all of them, but I started remembering them at the age of like 3 or 4. And so it's always been something there. And I've done past life readings for a really long time. And I look at what I call triangulation, which is two lives that are currently affecting us. Okay. So the lessons being learned in those parallel lives are lessons that we're also working at from a different direction in this life. So that's why sometimes, like, people who are connected to their past lives can have, like, early in life, maybe you're really, wow, I'm very drawn to Japanese culture and, Mandarin culture. And then I hit my 30s and that didn't interest me anymore. And now I really find that I'm drawn to, Egyptian and Mesopotamian lives, whatever it is, it's because you're moving through stages where, like, the lessons are different.
It does open up our perspective for
It
sure. And
does.
this,
We can learn from those lives. We can pull skills back from those lives. I wrote about that in my first book that I pulled back. I started doing vocal toning because I remembered doing it in a life in Egypt. And I was like, well, if I could do it then, I could do it now. And I was already a Reiki master in 3 schools of Reiki. So I just started doing it. And now I've done it for 20 years. I've taught classes on it. It's we can gain a lot from looking into who we've been and who we are.
I so agree. And to me, that's one of the valuable aspects of working in the Akashic Records. Bring the wisdom forward. Bring it forward. Help us to open up to this lifetime with all that
Yes.
we've learned. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We
Yeah.
need to, because we're living in, I believe that a lot of people who are here right now, the majority of people who are awake, if you want to use that term, are people who came in intentionally to be boots on the ground in this time of great change. And we need to have more awareness of not just ourselves in this lifetime, but of as many of ourselves as we can, so that we can share that knowledge. I'm also super non-competitive. So I'm like, I'm not the right reader for everybody. You're not the right reader for everybody. Or are we the right teacher for everybody? But it's important that we're doing this work because we got to wake a lot of people up.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when I kind of like recognized, all right, I come with strong medicine. I'm not for everybody.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
but for those that I
Right.
am, it works really well. And I think that's a really awareness of our own self and what we're here to do. And I think through all these studies, I've grown. I've grown so much. Even in my, I don't know how many years now, 12, 13 years I've been back in Birmingham since I left New York. And I'm about to go through another big transition. And I'm sure I'm going to take all of this with me and head out, and then a whole nother,
It's that
growth will come
10.
forward.
Right?
Yeah.
At 10, you're
Yeah.
at, like, I gained all my knowledge and now I'm going to tumble over into the next level. Okay. And
No
actually,
wonder I was reading those tens last night. How
okay, well,
funny.
here's the really interesting part. So, because I do numerology, 2025 is a 9. So that means that right now we're like at the equivalent of being the seniors of high school who've gathered all the knowledge that we can, and we're getting ready to graduate. And that means that next year things are going to be even newer, and we're going to be dealing with, because we're going to go back to that one. Okay. So 2026 is a 10 or a one in numerology. So it brings us back to that we've just cycled over again, and here we go. So how old are you?
I just turned 68 last week.
Okay. So you are a five, right?
I'm a
Yeah, this
five. I'm a
14
two,
is a
yeah,
five. So
325, I
you're
believe. Yep.
right. So that means that you personally in this year are, or in your own personal year, I look at five as being like you've gained all your tools to do your real work. Okay, so where you talk about doing something big and moving on, that's another way of looking at it is like, okay, yeah, you're right. You've got your tools and you're ready to head out onto the next journey.
Yeah, I am, which is really funny too, because as we're talking about that, I'm thinking, yeah, my daughter's pregnant and I'm going to be a grandmother. And so I'm going to be like,
Nice.
yeah, bringing those cards for those
There
kids. Let
you
me tell you how
go.
funny. Yeah, I'll be the grandmother. I don't think any of my grandmothers, read that. I know I have Native American on my mother's side. My father's mother was a very Renaissance woman, a very art oriented. She loved Edgar Casey. So I know she had some of that, but I don't know if anybody ever really did the cards. I really don't know any of that. So I always felt
There's
like
a
I'm
lot
the,
of different ways. I mean, I also do runes for divination. Some people do palmistry. In my book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, I talk about different forms of divination for each of the elements. There's things you can
yeah.
do with water, there's things you can do with fire and air, and even people who read clouds, that's actually a form of divination. There's so many ways. And once you open the door with one tool, it's easier to open the door with all the other tools because you understand what you're doing.
I love that. Yeah. Once we open the door, for sure. Well, Sally, you are so fascinating to talk to. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm so excited to really even use some of the spreads. I'm going to definitely look at that Black Moon spread as we come into that at the end of the month. So, where can we find your work? What else is going on? You just mentioned a great workshop you had. What else is going on?
Yeah. Well, I actually do sacred travel. So I'm getting ready. I'm taking a group of people to Ireland for Samhain this year. I did it last year. And then I have a spring trip. Last year we went to Shasta. This year we're looking at Scotland. And then I teach a lot, but right now I just am coming off a lot of teaching. But you can find my work on SaliCrow.com. That's SaliCrow.com. And my books can be found wherever books are sold. And I encourage you, if they're not at your local bookstore, to just ask because they are distributed worldwide. Um, Actually, exciting things. My book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, is being turned into Spanish. So it's being broken into four elements. So the first one will be Water Witch, and it is in the process right now of being translated. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's going on.
That is really awesome. Congratulations on that. And let's give a shout out to Inner Traditions for bringing it forward. Yes, they're awesome in all
Yes,
the
I
work that
love
they
them as a
do.
publisher.
Yeah, they are wonderful to work with too on my end too. And yes, and I know that Ritual Shelter can probably get the book as well. We do a lot of tarot reading there. Ritual Shelter is a sponsor for the podcast and is a center here in Birmingham for both tarot readers and people coming in for the first time. So there are a lot of readers that she brings through, and there's
Nice.
always a tarot reader in the store. So I'm sure that this book will be quite popular there as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So as we go to close, I like to come back and just leave our listeners with one last uplifting thought. How do you feel that the tarot as storyteller can help to empower the spirit right now?
I think that it'll empower your spirit because it helps you to understand that you are capable of guiding your own life. And because it simplifies how to do a reading and how to access our intuition. And in the beginning of the book, I have a lot of tips for people who are empathic, which is one of the big obstacles we have to overcome, right? Because being empathic is wonderful, but it also is overwhelming. So that stops a lot of people from going any further on their intuitive journey. So I highly recommend reading the beginning part of the book too. Read the whole thing, but the beginning part, if you're new, is going to give you some great tips for how to take care of yourself as a psychic intuitive.
Yeah, helping you to direct your life, opening that door, and the tips that we do need to protect our energy, but yet
Yeah,
go in. Yeah,
right.
definitely. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us today. Good luck with your
Thank
work.
you.
To your spirit. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yes, allow yourself to open the door to your consciousness. Be curious. Open up your intuition, get a tarot deck, start one card at a time. And as Sally says as she opens her book, intuition is not limited to a few, but something we are all naturally endowed with. We are at a time in human evolution to be more aware of our psychic energies, our telepathy, and the journey of the soul. Be sure to check out Sally's work. All the links will be in the show notes. Get her book. And if you're in need of help getting started with your spiritual practice, don't hesitate. Reach out and schedule a spiritual upgrade call with me. Thank you so much for listening. Yes, leave me a review on iTunes. It does help the podcast to be found. Be sure to check out my website for all my latest offerings. Thank you again for listening. I am your host, Terri Ann Heiman. To your spirit, namaste.